Hi everyone, and welcome to our overview of Chapter 1, Introduction to Law and Governance. Most people pay little attention to law and governance, even though they both have a vast impact on our daily lives. It is no exaggeration to say that most of us would not even be alive today if it were not for the law. Law is the essential tool humans use to create peace, order, and prosperity from chaos. Wise and just laws can be powerful forces in not just protecting life, liberty, and property, but also in promoting the general welfare and human progress. Much of the success of the United States is due to its early commitment to the rule of law and the establishment of a constitutional system of governance. Look at history and look around the world today. Places under the democratic rule of law are safe and prosperous places where citizens enjoy essential human rights and liberties. In contrast, places that are under the rule of unchecked authoritarian powers are corrupt, lawless, and dangerous places, with economic systems that exploit the fearful masses for the benefit of those with the most power. Democracy is imperfect, but as Winston Churchill recognized, it is superior to all other forms of governance humans have so far tried. But democracy can only exist where it thrives in the hearts and minds of a well-educated people, armed with the knowledge of the essential lessons of history. Our collective future depends on how well we teach these lessons of history, democracy, and the rule of law to our children. But before we can teach our children to respect, support, and advance the rule of law and democracy, we must first master these principles ourselves. Knowing the law is essential for all persons, and especially for professionals. So I am delighted to present you with Chapter 1, Introduction to Law and Governance. Chapter 1 will provide you with an engaging and thorough introduction to constitutional governance and its essential systems of interactive checks and balances under the democratic rule of law. An understanding of the framework of U.S. law and governance will prove invaluable to your later comprehension of education law and its application in practice. It is critically important that educators working in public institutions understand the mandates of the Constitution and the lawful system of democratic governance. Public school educators are government officials legally bound by the limitations of the Constitution. Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution requires that all government agents, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. As required by Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution, all 50 states mandate oaths in which all public officials, including public educators, must affirm their support for the federal and state constitutions. If a public educator has not signed this required oath, that person cannot be lawfully employed by the state. And public officials who violate their oaths of office through ignorance may nonetheless be subject to dismissal and monetary damages under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983 and other applicable laws. But many educators have not actually read and fully understood the legal mandates and limitations of the Constitution they're swearing to uphold. The reality is, most educators simply sign these printed oaths along with other employment documents. They don't really know what they are signing or what the Constitution and laws actually require of them. They generally ignore the law until they find they have unknowingly wandered on the wrong side of it and learn the hard way that ignorance of the law is no excuse. As a matter of both professional competence and self-protection, it is essential that educators understand the laws and governance systems applicable to their profession. This is necessary so that they may perform their professional duties in accordance with the law, protect their own rights, and help protect the legal rights of their students, colleagues, and community. And importantly, educators who know the law and understand the system of governance are far better prepared to teach this essential knowledge to their students. Our schools are the essential nurseries of our democracy, but democracy can be lost in a single generation if educators are not adequately prepared to teach the essential lessons of history, democracy, and the rule of law to the next generation of citizens. Among the most important lessons educators can teach their students is that the enforcement of laws and rules are not just an arbitrary exercise of power and positional authority. Instead, students must see through daily experiences that educators are consistently acting in their best interest, fairly and in good faith, as part of a just system of laws and rules essential to achieving the institutional order necessary for the common good. Educators will also find they are much more likely to get cooperation and respect from students when students understand that educators are acting fairly and under the rule of law for the common benefit of everyone. Our nation's founders recognized that the exercise of government power was necessary to protect everyone's life, liberty, and property. But they also recognized that a government with unchecked and excessive powers was the greatest potential danger to individual life, liberty, and property. Totalitarian governments have killed millions of their own people, imprisoned countless citizens because of their political and religious beliefs, and seized private property when there was no lawful system of checks and balances guarding against these abuses of power. To guard against these dangers, our founders established within the U.S. Constitution a dynamic, interactive system of checks and balances to help prevent the accumulation and abuse of governmental power. They created a multifaceted system capable of evolving and adapting to changing circumstances and needs. Nonetheless, no matter how well designed, a governance system can never be better than the people who must make it function. The founders knew that this system would ultimately collapse and fail unless the people understood and defended the foundational values of democracy and the rule of law, and understand the historical reasons democracy and the common rule of law were necessary. As a thorough student of history, Thomas Jefferson recognized, "Those who expect to be ignorant and free expect what never was and never will be." And as the American philosopher George Santayana said, "Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it." There are two ways of learning the essential lessons of history, democracy, and the rule of law: through direct personal experience or vicariously through the historical examples and experiences of others. Those who suffered under totalitarian regimes and who suffered the chaos of revolution and war have learned many powerful lessons about the importance of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. But these essential lessons were learned through the great price of personal suffering. We can spare ourselves and our children from this suffering if we have the wisdom to learn and teach the essential lessons of history, and if we maintain the courage, strength, and determination to demand that our government officials respect fundamental human rights, democratic values, and the just rule of law. Ironically, among the greatest dangers to the continuation of freedom and democracy may be the complicity that can set in among those who have always enjoyed the fruits of freedom and democracy in their lives. If you have no real personal knowledge of the horrors of totalitarian rule, constant police state surveillance, government torture, dissenters disappearing, and well-founded fears of expressing your sincerely held religious and political beliefs, how well prepared and motivated are you to defend against these dangers? History shows that a democracy rarely becomes a police state overnight. More commonly, citizens' rights and liberties are gradually eroded over time, like the slow-boiling frog that would have immediately tried to jump out if tossed into a pot of boiling water, but passively cooks if the water temperature is only gradually increased. People are inclined to ignore small incremental losses of freedom as government power expands. They continue to go about their daily lives passively, too busy with their own personal affairs to react to small but ever-growing extensions of governmental power encroaching upon human rights and liberties. But small incremental losses of rights can accumulate to dangerous losses of liberty over time. Government officials who do not respect democracy and the rule of law will always present seemingly plausible reasons why they need more power, but the people need less rights. Why government officials need more secrecy, but the people deserve less privacy and need to be watched more closely. Why the emergencies of the moment justify exceptions to the rule of law that quickly become permanent. And these arguments are especially easy to sell when the majority of the people do not know the lessons of history and can be convinced that increased governmental powers are intended only for others and not for them. As the Nazis gradually transformed the German democracy into a totalitarian nightmare, millions of German citizens cheered, convinced that this growing governmental power would only benefit them and only be used against others. But as government power grows, so does the scope of its targets, until ultimately no one is safe. As Pastor Martin Niemöller famously said, "They came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for me, and by that time no one was left to speak up." The Nazis led Germany and everyone around them to disaster. History proves that what we don't know can hurt us. Ignorance and indifference are grave dangers to our future. The remedy is education, and by learning the lessons of history, democratic governance, and the rule of law, you will be better prepared to teach your children and to actively participate in your own governance under the common rule of law. In Chapter 1, you will study the fundamental theory and history of the Anglo-American legal system, how to operationalize a democratic system of law and governance in your own nation, state, community, and school, the proper balance of federal, state, and local powers, the U.S. judicial system, and the litigation process. A shared intergenerational commitment to the ideals of democracy and the just rule of law has played an essential role in the progress of America, and it is the key to a better America in the future. I hope that Chapter 1, An Introduction to Law and Governance, will engage you as an active participant in keeping democracy and the rule of law alive in your community and in our nation, and help to make you and your children active participants in building a better future for yourselves and everyone. Very best wishes to all.